In preparation for my commentary of Arkham Knight, I found myself in need of an answer to a very strange question. What game do we mean when we talk about Arkham Asylum? To a PC guy, that probably doesn't make much sense, but everyone else has long moved on from the consoles it was originally released on. They're broken, sold, collecting dust. So if they want to play Arkham Asylum, and it being Arkham Asylum, that is likely, what do? They play a different game, a remastered version of the original. They play Return to Arkham Asylum. Back when it released, a return might have been what it was, but as time has passed and the gap in availability between the original and the remaster has widened, it's not a return anymore. It's Arkham. To most people, you say Arkham Asylum, this is the game they think of. Which sucks, because Return to Arkham is a joke. I mean, it's great, because it's still Arkham, but when your existence and price tag are entirely justified by having better art than the original, and you don't have better art than the original, and you actually have worse art than the original, and you're paying far more money for that than you ever would have for a port, then do you really think I'm being harsh? Let me convince you. Return to Arkham is more realistic, which is not good. See how the new reflections create a sleekness, how things become cleaner and prettier. What use does Batman Arkham Asylum have for words like that? It makes for a nice screenshot, but it doesn't make a better experience. You got realistic materials on costumes, and that takes from the sense that this is Batman at his most elemental. It takes from the comic book style. Realistic lighting makes the lighting look more pleasant, but much less harsh, instead of the burned whites of a surgical lamp that create the impression that it would hurt to stare. We get clarity, and accuracy, and beauty. To the benefit of what? The remaster saturates the electrical blues and softens their shape, which makes them feel more advanced, more reliable, more safe. And again, we're going the wrong way. Better to look scrappy, strained, as though a fuse could blow, as though it would sting to even be near them. The realism of Return to Arkham, its perfect reflections and textures, its overworld now slick with realistic rain, has an inevitable effect. Reality counteracts ethereality. The material pushes out the immaterial. Basically, where's the magic gone? That unspoken magic, that soft sense of something more, that made a green moon make sense. It's muted, it's quiet, the gates are closed, and now this world is solid all the way through. Look at what they've done to the moon. I don't mean to go moon woke, but why did they whitewash the moon? The moon was green because a green moon is strange. The sky was red because a red sky is mad. The color gives the moon a presence, a life of some sort, as though it was an extension of the spirit of the island, or the island an extension of the moon. It created the sense that the madness of the asylum was elemental, larger than its rocks and the makings of man, deeper and older and more inescapable. That is a gothic way to feel. But Return to Arkham clearly thought that was a mistake, so it breaks out the bleach and scrubs it down to the bone. I mean, isn't it offensive enough that it trades something unique for something generic? Isn't it enough to say that Asylum's strength of atmosphere was by far the most successful part of its fiction, and the remaster has carelessly made it lesser? If it isn't, don't worry, there's more. It conflicts with what surrounds it. It creates incohesion, like with the user interface, which is still under the impression that there remains a comic book style to complement, or the exterior appearance of the asylum, whose strangeness, once in no need of explanation, now looks that little bit more awkward for being pushed so much closer to the ground. And there's the inevitable incohesion caused by injecting huge amounts of visual realism into only some of a world. The remaster updates textures and lighting, but not geometry. PS4 skin on a PS3 body. And then there's the cutscenes, now rendered in-engine, which helpfully avoids any feeling of disconnect between cutscene and gameplay. But the price for that, tone, personality, not looking like a source film, was, as you can probably tell, really very much not worth paying. There are people playing Arkham for the first time right now and meeting a Joker who looks like that. People who had no choice but to play a version of the game where the visuals were made with no care nor interest in what's actually best for the game. So it's no surprise you can find so many small moments that discard intentional composition in favor of what's prettier. When we find Officer Balls' corpse, notice how the lighting's lack of focus means you get less of the sense that he's been deliberately displayed, like an exhibit. The Joker teeth no longer cast shadows for some reason, and the now yellow door behind him has lost its grit and monstrousness. Truth is, the remaster doesn't always look worse. Sometimes its changes are either inoffensive or even good, in cases where the prettier image has no real cost, and there's value in that. There's value in the simple beauties, and more often than not, Return to Arkham is a very pretty game. But it is not better art. It's not more interesting, more memorable, more effective, or more useful in support of the narrative. And that isn't worth the trade. Oh, and it still runs at 30 FPS too. So at least you get the same performance on a PS5 as you did on a console now 20 years old. But this video isn't about Arkham Asylum. It's about remasters, and not a growing trend, nor a small minority. There are good remasters, but the truth is, the bad remasters are most remasters. Why, time and time again, do we find ourselves with no choice but to play a version of a game defaced? Good question, but first, it might be wise to try remastering yourself. Everyone wants to do software these days, but software is difficult, lemon difficult. It's not lemon impossible though, and there's a website called boot.dev that proved even a word cell like me can get to grips with code, provided the right tutor. Substantial lessons that are then put into practice, leading to crucial experience actually doing what you'll be doing on the job, along with clear and measurable progress. In other words, it's learning that's not boring, and that's the learning that sticks. Python, Java, C, other strange terms, taking you from the start right to the end of back-end web development. I managed to get a baseline understanding of Python in less than an hour, and I'm very glad to hear they just came out with the Training Grounds, a place where learners can grind out challenges to practice as much as they need before moving forward with the courses. So if becoming Mr. Robot sounds as good to you as it does to me, then check out the link below and use code WHITELIGHT to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. So what is it then that makes remasters so frequently awful? Maybe it's bad philosophy. The idea that a remaster needs you to believe is that the original game looks the way it does because of technical limitations. It's because the hardware of the time wasn't good enough, and whatever the game used to look like is just what they had to settle for, which makes it make sense that a remaster from half a dozen years in the future could come down like a HDR angel from a 4K cloud and lift it from the shackles of the past, make it look the way it always should have, the way it always wanted to. That is what remasters need you to accept. It justifies positioning themselves as the definitive version of a game, and it's what makes the current gen player feel privileged to be getting the best possible version of an older classic. But it's a lie. Thing is though, there is a nugget of truth in there, and maybe that's what makes it easy to swallow. We didn't have the technology to make games actually look realistic until around 2014. Games like Order 1886, Second Son, Unity, Arkham Knight, and Drive Club are pretty much the first generation of games that look realistic then and still look realistic now. But go back any earlier? Not quite the case. Before the PS4 generation, if you had even a little bit of realism in your visual style, you were going to be held back, and people were going to be able to tell. Assassin's Creed 2 probably didn't want its character models to look like this. It was a limitation, and it is a flaw. So maybe it does interest me if you can fix that. Maybe in that regard the remaster is right, and its existence is justified. But that's not what remasters tend to do though. That's not what the Assassin's Creed 2 remaster did. The Assassin's Creed 2 remaster believes that because the game was going for a certain level of realism, it couldn't have wanted to be anything else. It knows that games at the time needed to have some visual style to cover up for their technical limitations, but it mistakenly takes that to mean that the game's visual style was only there because it had to be, that that's not how the developers really wanted the game to look, and that they chose that style over any other style they could have chosen instead, because, well, I don't know. There never seems to be an answer for that. Maybe they threw darts. The Assassin's Creed 2 remaster is pretty obviously wrong. The original game needed style, but its dreamlike ethereality was chosen. And it was chosen for a reason. It contributed a sense of being painted that fit with the Renaissance period, and the narrative's attitude of expressiveness and freedom. It contributed the sense of being aged, historicity in that way, and of being fragile, which helped to emphasize the fragility of its world and Ezio's place within it. But what it doesn't contribute is realism, so the remaster kicks it in the balls. Marvel at it. Remastered glory. It's more like everything else, and at a complete loss for everything the original style meant. Now we've got water that's all but sterilized itself into invisibility, and a professional was paid money to do that. Now the game suffers constantly from the mismatch of the realism of the textures with a completely unchanged 2009 looking ass geometry. Now the soundtrack and the visual design of the user interface are lesser because they were made to support a different vibe. I guess the remaster must have heard Dreams of Venice and thought it was just a coincidence that it was called Dreams of Venice and not super realistic 4K Venice. But that's the thing, the remaster doesn't actually give us super realistic realistic 4K Venice, does it? That's just what it would like to be. What it really is slightly more realistic Venice, and that causes a big problem because if you throw out the style that softened the roughness of your mediocre graphics, and then you don't actually improve the graphics that much, their mediocrity becomes all the more exposed, and you've caused the problem you were trying to fix. Look at Monteriggioni. What the fuck? Look at it! Actually, don't look at it. I feel like I'd be better off posting this type of gore on LiveLeak. And the remaster just doesn't seem to care that the music stayed the same. The track that plays here, Sanctuary, is a blend of a sort of homely feeling of comfort with a contrasting sense of creeping anxiety and a grief that speaks to all the nuances of Ezio's heart. Does the game still look like the words I've just said? It doesn't. It looks happy. It looks like a normal afternoon. Don't you think the supposedly definitive edition of a video game should care about these kind of things? And sometimes there's literally just less graphics in the remaster. Where's the reflectivity of the marble gone? You know, they made a movie about this exact thing, where according to some bullshit beauty standard, these industry suits kept trying to remaster Demi Moore, and she ended up turning into a busted-ass horrible flesh monster. Now, according to some, the moral of the story is that we shouldn't pressure women into thinking they need the latest ray-traced reflections or something. But I think Faget had something a little more socially conscious in mind. Demi Moore is Assassin's Creed 2. And honestly, somebody had to say something about it, because when games get turned into horrible flesh demons, we thank them for the privilege. To the remaster's credit, I think the vibrancy of certain colors does add a sense of life, which has no place in Monteriggioni, but works with the Carnival of Venice and Florence. I think the game looks fine, but it's not the definitive Assassin's Creed 2. Also, guess what? 30 FPS. Yep, 30 FPS. You could run the original at 30,000 on your average fridge these days, but a PS5 that can teleport you to real-life Mexico in no seconds at 60 FPS, 30 for Assassin's Creed 2. Take it or leave it. I'd say leave it, but it's not like you have a choice. Okay, now it's time to talk about Life is Strange. People hated it because there were women in it. People loved it because there were women in it. It was really fucking stupid and quite lovely, and its vibe struck such a chord with people. It was nostalgia for a place you'd never been, but of course you had been here. Because Arcadia Bay was a capturing of the feelings of a bittersweet childhood memory, a return to a complicated past. And a misunderstanding of the human root of that vibe is why so many games have tried to be the next Life is Strange, but none of them have even come close. Including Life is Strange Remastered, which is great. No, I'm kidding, it's dog shit. Far less offensively than Return to Arkham or the Ezio Collection, and unless you're on a Switch, you even have a choice. The remaster didn't replace the original, but it never looks much better than the original, and it quite often looks a little bit worse. So yeah, I think selling yourself entirely on the premise of at least usually looking better, that qualifies as being rather arse. Color grading, randomly screwed with, mostly for the worse. Reflections on the fountain are just, I don't know, gone. Chromatic aberration too, a strange move considering the ethereal vibe and the theme of photography. Lighting is hit or miss, better on real rare occasion. Sometimes it's a neutral change, but then there's moments of flatness, and that's such a loss. They touched up the facial animations a little, mostly in the eyes, and it's mostly a decent upgrade, but it can rob certain moments of their personality and their numbness. It's hard to believe the remaster team could have thought Max's empty stare when she's at the killer's mercy was unintended. They've done the realism thing in a sort of different way. It's not HD textures or flattening out the style, it's adding the details that would realistically be there. Clothing sometimes gets a material texture, and most natural surfaces now have lots of detailed flora, a diverse arrangement of grasses, weeds, and fallen leaves. On the upside, realism, if you were inclined to view realism as an upside, which would be strange in a game like this, with such a defined style. The original looks like it could have been a sketch in Max's notebook. It looks painted, dreamed, or remembered, which is exactly the kind of feeling Life is Strange wanted to evoke, and needless detail is a small detraction, in return for nothing. So there's an interesting question here. What would a good remaster of Life is Strange be like? Let's start with a different question. What would a good remaster of Assassin's Creed 2 look like? At this point, such a thing might seem difficult to imagine, but I still wouldn't mind having those character models fixed. Add realism where realism wanted to be but couldn't be. Never supplant a game's art direction with realism simply because you can. That's pretty much the difference between the remaster of Halo Combat Evolved, which is generally regarded to be one of the biggest piles of dogshit humanity has ever produced, and the Halo 2 remaster, which is, usually, quite good. You have a game where the textures look like the crisp packet you pull out of your dog's asshole, you recognize that probably wasn't a productive or intentional stylistic choice, you fix it, and you don't view the simplicity of the art direction as a mistake. So there is a way this can be done. But what about Life is Strange? That's different. because to whatever degree realism was a part of its look, that realism was already achieved in the original. It didn't have bad character models like Assassin's Creed 2. It didn't have pop-in or busted-ass textures. It wasn't held back. And for the most part, neither was Arkham Asylum. There's a texture here and there that could do with a higher resolution, and it is obvious that the game isn't using modern graphical techniques. But is it also not clear that it has no need of them? Is there anything wrong with this image? A bad remaster would throw in a bunch more realism anyway, and that's exactly what we got. But then, what's left for a good remaster to do? Maybe pump up the stylization? It can be done. It has been done, but modding the blacks of Watch Dogs blacker, contributing a handful of new skyboxes and careful consideration of the tone would seem a far easier lot than improving upon the style would be for most other games. Think about what you'd be asking the remaster team to do. See those original artists, the ones who knew the game's art direction best because they created it, in collaboration with the writers and the level designers and the graphics engineers and the other creative and technical teams. Yeah, now do their jobs better than they could. You can see how that might be difficult, disrespectful, implausible. So if you're looking to be a good remaster, kinda seems like you're running out of options. Maybe, sometimes, the good remaster is the one that doesn't exist. So why does it exist? Why was Arkham Asylum remastered? Well, the answer to that is money. Philosophy will only get you so far. There are many things it cannot explain. Like, why is it only the games that need a visual uplift the least that get remastered? Because those are usually the games that sold the most. In a healthy creative industry, it would be the other way around. But instead, remaster and remake teams are frequently asked to fix the work of some of the most artistically complete video games not only of their time, but of the medium itself. Yeah, good luck. Here's another problem. Ports of old games don't sell like remasters, because a remaster can do something a port can't. A remaster can make an old game feel new. Not because of what it actually does to the game, but simply because it is a new release. And if it's new, then it's current. And there is a cherished, though sometimes imprisoning, sense of community in what's current. And if it's new, that means it's meant for you, the modern gamer, with modern tastes who might otherwise feel apprehensive about the accessibility of older titles, or even something approaching shame, because old games aren't current, and that kind of thing is for nerds. And it's validating for a game you love to be honored this way, and for it to be made new again, which of course means it isn't old anymore, and maybe in some part neither are you. And thanks to some personal blend of all those things put together, more people will buy a remaster than a port, and they'll buy it for a higher price. Listen to how fans of Arkham Origins talk about their interest in a remaster. They want to be able to play the game on modern hardware, but the fact that that's a straightforward argument for a port, not the thing you're forced to buy for more money instead of a port, is completely ignored. They want something more. They speak about its exclusion from the Return to Arkham collection as an insult, as if what happened to Asylum and City was an honor. Now, if you want your takes a little less controversial, then I've got just the thing. Last of Us 2, whose remaster is a joke, and everyone knows it. You can't even tell which is which without one of Digital Foundry's electron microscopes. No one believes them when they say they tried. So why does it exist? Because that word that they exalted with this fugly-ass orange on the cover art sells, and it did. So, old games in no need of a remaster get remastered anyway. Games that are not available on current hardware are remastered instead of ported, and there is an incentive not to port an old game onto a new system if you even so much as might remaster it, because you want to sell that potential game for the highest price to all those who just want to be able to play it. Maybe I'm too cynical, but consider the fact that the original version tends to magically disappear from storefronts the moment the remaster becomes available. Wouldn't want to confuse the customer, I'm sure would be the excuse, but now you've no choice but to buy Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered and Dark Souls Remastered, whose original versions online was shut down to make way for the new and improved. Here's another problem. The remaster is not sold based on how beneficial its changes are to the experience, nor is it reviewed on that basis. The remaster is sold based on how upgraded it can seem in a cherry-picked instant of a YouTube comparison video. And most of the time, it's either reviewed on purely technical terms or not at all. In a second-long snapshot of a random scene, it's impossible to consider the changes made to color grading, to know or to recall the emotional intentions of the moment. It's decontextualized. And in that environment, what matters most if you're looking to form a positive impression are the simplest aesthetic values, and what's most immediately perceptible. You need to look like you have more graphics than the original. You need to be able to see the difference, and see that it's a big one. You don't need to make the game look better for any longer than about 5 seconds. Is Hatham's arrival in America supposed to feel cold? Is Boston supposed to feel warm and welcoming? Well, no, but the point is, all you can tell from the trailer or the comparison video is that the remaster looks prettier, and that creates an incentive. Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered has two big ideas: make it bright and make it orange, with all the graphical might of the 8th generation. And to be perfectly honest, it does actually look pretty nice. Meadows are now idyllic meadows. Towns are now idyllic towns, filled with warmth and notes of calm and divinity. Wonderful news for your screenshot tools, but pretty as it is, what use is that to Assassin's Creed 3? Connor is meant to feel torn between two worlds as he walks through Boston, his lands ravaged by war. But now his lands and Boston both look like a fucking postcard. Are those the right notes to play? The better question is, did that matter when these decisions were being made? There's another side to Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, something that changes the conversation. It's the fact that a lot of it actually just looks like dog shit. By a lot of it, I mean everyone's faces, everyone's bodies, and all the cutscenes, where that heavenly orange glow seems to look a lot more like an ongoing supernova. Shadows gone, faces already in the process of melting off, it seems, but the textures have more pixels in them, I defiantly shout as the cosmic rays turn me into a future civilization's petroleum. Now, this is curious because, unlike before, there's no upside. You're not trading artistic merit for surface-level aesthetics, you're just getting the part where they turn you into a homunculus. And everyone can see that. So what the fuck's going on? Because that can't be explained with philosophy or incentive. No. But it can still be explained with money. Remasters are made on the cheap. I mean, probably. It's not like they publish their financials. But there are some things we know, like that they are frequently made in short periods of time and usually outsourced to smaller studios. They're contract work, and contracts go to the lowest bidder. And if quality is what you're looking for, that's a really bad place to be. Or maybe not. But I can't think of any other explanation, because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that there is no such thing as the artist who believes that is better than that. There is something they did not have, and I'm willing to bet that it's either money or because of money. Dark Souls Remastered is probably bad because of money. It has a new lighting system, and sometimes that new lighting system is of use. Most of the time though, its effect is a sort of mild and general blandening. Name the scene, and if you expect it'll be a more flatly lit version of its prior self, you'll be right 9 times out of 10. Darkness, brightened, contrast, flattened. The way the light plays off clothing, armor, and skin, reduced of character so severely that they don't even look like the things they're supposed to be anymore. Metals become plastic, and characters come to look like their own action figures. Look at the fucking fog doors, man. Usually I'd be all for traversing the white light. But honestly, this time, stay away from me. I look hideous. Dark Souls Remastered is too lazy to have actually committed any major artistic trespass. Mostly, they've just taken a bit of kitchen towel and dabbed it across the surface of the game, trying to suck up as much personality as they could. And yet, despite the relatively minor offenses, it stands out among the Return to Arkhams and the AC2s for the same reason as Assassin's Creed 3, not having an upside. It's not prettier, the textures are higher resolution, but the remaster exposes the game's graphical shortcomings more often than it erases them. You get a worse looking game for nothing in return. How does that happen? Technical talk is speculation. I don't know, and I don't know anyone who does. Maybe it has something to do with the old art assets not being made with the new lighting system in mind, and not having the money or ability to change that. Maybe it's something similar. You make broad systemic changes, but you don't have the time to make specific tunings for each individual scene. Maybe that explains the legendary edition of Mass Effect 2, that has far better lighting tech and far worse lighting. I think that's close to being the truth, but I can't be sure. Of anything besides this, money is why the remaster of Silent Hill 2 was the way it was.
To change the fucking font to Comic Sans in the HD. Yeah, cause...
And so it was for Dead Rising, and Dark Souls, and Warcraft, and GTA 3, and Vice City, and San Andreas, and so many more. And that leaves me with only one place left to go. When remasters tell us that they will make our games look better, why do we believe them? I've avoided talking about the second party in this mess until now, but that's us. That's the gaming public who accept the remasters' premises when they tell us that realism and new graphics technologies will make our games look better. Something is wrong with the way we think about art. Because if you said what remasters say about games, about something like SpongeBob or Akira, you'd be laughed at. If you said the same thing about a painting, people would think you're insane. What's happening there? Well, I think the start of it is the simple fact that the gaming public has developed a deeply ingrained association of realism with quality, because for decades, the games that could be the most realistic were also the games that could be the longest, the most explosive and entertaining. the most accessible and reliable, the ones with the best multiplayer, the best acting, and not uncommonly pretty good narratives too, because those were the games with the most money. People trust realism, because for nearly 30 years they've had a reason to. The 4 most visually realistic games of 2025 are 4 of its best. And to be clear, realism is awesome. It's privileged. It shouldn't be. But the last thing I want this video to suggest is that you're some kind of low IQ Neanderthal for liking graphics. I'm glad that cars in games can look like the cars I actually want to drive. The games that want to deal with Earth as it exists or ever existed, that want to represent its beauties or those of the universe beyond, are able to do so. I'm happy that Hideo Kojima can just put Lea Seydoux in Magic Mexico, and relatedly, that detailed physical acting is a thing that can be done. I look forward to every coming advancement. But there's also something else, and that's the harder thing. Gamers. Yeah, gamers. Modern audiences. Yeah, I'm going there. Gamers don't respect art. Much, and on average, but come on. We still haven't even managed to widely convince ourselves that games are a legitimate art form. So it's no surprise that we're struggling with the notion that visual art in games is, actual art. Pay attention to the language we use when we talk about art in games. Presentation, we call it, in casual conversation and even in our reviews. Like that's what it is, a means of presenting. What? The things that actually matter? Like it's makeup, dress up, rather than being as much the game as any other part of it. We're happy to call it art. We're happy to use that word interchangeably with presentation. But we don't mean it. We don't treat it like art. Like we'd treat that same art if we saw it outside a video game. And that's why when this gets changed to this, there are people who care more about how many pixels are up there instead of how many stars. Or when remasters fuck with the color grading seemingly at random, people don't seem to realize that by changing the color, you change the scene. Orange lighting is different from gray lighting. When Desmond is rescued from Abstergo and taken to be among friends and allies, that's orange for a reason. It's warmth, it's home, it's an echo of Florence. It's contrast to the blues and grays of where I was held captive. Replace the sun with silver, and you're diminishing that contrast. A statement that would be pretty uncontroversial if we were talking about a movie. But with games, there's a tendency to just let it go like it never meant anything, like there's no purpose to the colors of a scene, like it just depends on whether you prefer the color orange to the color gray. There is something gravely wrong with the way we look at art in games. They've got us paying anything they ask to have our games bleached and botoxed, intention and expression airbrushed away so we can better perceive a blade of grass. They're not gonna change, so it's gonna have to be us. And with that, I'd like to return to Arkham. Yeah, Arkham City's not much better than Asylum. City's moon was always white, but you're never under the impression that if it wasn't, they wouldn't have changed it. Look at what they did to the skybox. Why would you do that? It's so strange, because the rest of the game goes in the other direction, guided by the philosophy that every visual element would be better if it stood out as much as possible from its surroundings. Bolder colors, brighter lights, clearer details, from the indentations in a building to the creases in Batman's cloak. What that means in terms that matter is that everything looks less aged and less weathered. A broad sense of struggle, of an old world crumbling into a ravenous sea, shivering in the wind and the cold, abandoned as the city's warm lights loom tall so far from reach, all watered down. As clothing looks fresh from the press, like it's been worn for a day, not enduring hell for months, while characters like Catwoman are so overpronounced, so clean and sharp and crammed with attention-grabbing details, that they begin to feel out of place in their own world. Reflections embolden the neon tenfold, bringing a sense of life to a world meant to be fading out. And yet, the color grading is gone. Blue, orange, now all of it's black, and you lose that sense of temperature. The cold has lost its bite. Look at the steel mill, how the fire used to be the dominant source of its light. And now look at the remaster. Where's that sense of heat? Oh, and before I forget, where's my other 30 FPS? Why is this shit chugging like it's 2011? What hurts is that this is the new Arkham City. For so many, this is the only Arkham City, the only one they ever knew or ever will. As games continue to be remastered instead of ported, what will happen to their image and their memory? What art will we think of when someone says their name, long in the future, as the gap in accessibility between the original and the remaster grows ever larger? How much more time do we have until publishers decide to make a quick buck by replacing the PC versions? How much longer until it happens to our favorite games of today? How long before they start getting AI to do this? Stop killing games, and stop defacing them, and stop believing their insult just because they sprinkled it with glitter, or expect a future where ports don't come, and the best of our generation is contracted out to the lowest bidder to be remolded in plastic again and again and again and again. And extra special thanks go out to L. Hudson, Lex Williams, Andre Baltuta, Holy Shift, Dennis Williams, Combat Wombat, John Lemley, Dylan Schaefer-Murphy, Have a Nice Day, Dan Walker, DJ, Week Sentry, Chino, Chase Baker, Dogs Ate My Pancreas, William Vossler, Joe Simmons, Arcturus, Navy Husky, MT the Poet, Deluxo, Dr. Pavel, Enzo, John C., Ethan Seach, Pib, Fat Guy 688, Purple PP, Joshua Lovejoy, Veda, James Kittle, Cole Bramlett, Walshy, White Light Best Girl, Tentmaker Kafka, New XC, Very Professional Dodo, Douglas Totally Straight Up Anonymous Yo, Mark Carter, Nikita Shoshin, Dog Best Dog, I echolocate my husband using your voice, Nebulous Rascal, Bumble Grumble Double Crumble Bumhole Pummel Shovel Puddle Huddle Jumble, Tidemore, LA Lockwood, Anna Haig, Foxhunt, Christopher Shah, Eddie, Rams, Daniel Tankersley, The Lightweight White Light Wait to Light Late Whites, Oh My God Wide 2, Robert Thompson, XD Shadow Frog, Chan, Triplicate, Pugsley IV, Midgets, Shooting Sharp 34, Microlapse, Edward Franklin Woods, Crane, Virgil's JCE, Plague BT, Cave Snail, Matin NG, and Jim Hobbs.